30 Under 30 Summit returned to Gaborone, Botswana for its 2024 edition, starting on day one, welcoming guests with on-stage performances from the likes of Omalay and Nick Cannon. This gathering set the tone for the rest of the summit. This annual gathering of innovators and impact-minded young entrepreneurs and leaders convened to inspire the next generation in key growth areas. The Botswana Vice President Slamba Tsokwane voices the importance of having the correct infrastructure to ensure a brighter future for the youth, and in doing so, set up the next Forbes 30 Under 30 success story.
We have realized very soon that the educational outcomes are not very much aligned to the labor market, to the extent that today we are talking about mismatch, and we want to address the mismatch. Entrepreneurship is a new phenomenon, although in the past it was done, but it was traditional, so to speak. We have just embarked on transformation, led by our National Vision 2036. When the wheels look like they are coming off, His Excellency, the President, Dr. Mokwezi Eric Masisi, called us together as his cabinet, and we interrogated why it appears as if the wheels are coming off insofar as development and the path that we have chartered is concerned, especially the transformation, because when he ascended to the presidency, his take was to transform the economy, to make it a knowledge-based economy. That meant a lot of work in terms of regulations and policies, to look into our policies, and one of them was to embark on legislation to protect knowledge that people have, as well as the skills that they have, including the indigenous knowledge. So we came up with several bills. One of the most critical is the IP, intellectual property right. So we succeeded. But as I'm speaking today, I'm saying I think we are on the right path with Forbes Under 30, which we brought to Africa, not only Botswana, but to Africa. We are developing the entrepreneurship. We are developing young people. That is why when I spoke earlier on, I told them that the overriding criterion is competitiveness. Because if you are not ready for competition, then I think you are in the wrong environment.
Whilst educating and encouraging the youth to enter the world of entrepreneurship, the creative economy, Africans telling the African story, still resonates as a key component at this year's summit.
There was a lot of buzz on social media when Forbes announced that you'd be coming to Botswana. You know, what is it that you wanted to bring when coming to Botswana during the Under 30 Summit?
I don't know if I wanted to necessarily bring anything. I mean, I was just as excited as everyone else. I mean, having never been to Botswana before, I knew that it was going to be a lot of inspiration here, and you know, to know that even in the entire continent of Africa, that 70% of the population is under the age of 30. So it's truly the future. So I mean, I was just excited to be a part of that energy.
When we compare, the creative economy in the US and we compare the creative economy in, Africa, there's a big difference, right? Yeah. For you, what is it that, because you've been in the industry for a long time, from your learnings and from your challenges and from your setbacks, but also from your success, what is it that you would like to, say to the youth to empower them to continue on with the creative economy in Africa?
I mean, to know that there are no limits to know that, you know, the world now based off of technology and is truly at your fingertips. Something can go viral from Botswana just as quick as something can go viral from New York City. And that's true, you know, equality and equity right there. To know that that's the beauty of everything right now, that from business to entertainment, that it's an even playing field, because one, there's so much more opportunity here. There's so many more people. There's so much more energy, and then realizing that the world feeds off of that. So I truly believe this is the place that, you know, everyone needs to be and should desire to be.
How important is it for us to be taking these global stages, but not only that, for the global stage to be coming to us?
Well, I think the main thing is really just about ownership, right? Because the world has always come to Africa when we talk about our history, without getting too political. But when we talk about, when we look at really the natural resources and who owns them, the world owns them more than Africans own them. So we start there, we start with history. And then we come to who we are as a generation now. And I love Gen Z because they're so outspoken. They have literally broken shackles of the silenced millennials or the tiptoeing millennials. And so we're really living in a new renaissance where we don't want to be told what our narrative is. We want to control the narrative. We want to tell our story the way that we want to tell it, right? No one's trying to sound American. No one's trying to make American music. We're making African music, right? And the world is really just consuming it. And it's a beautiful sight. So for me to be able to live in a generation that is really taking the reins, and it's taking the reins in so many different sectors, whether you're talking about energy and your fourth industrial revolution, whether you're talking about sports, right? You look at so many of the global sportsmen and sportswomen who are really, you know, like galvanizing the entire world. And then you look at the arts and entertainment. I mean, I don't even have to say it, right? Shout out to Tyler for her Grammy, okay? But even before Tyler, there was your Lady Smith Black Mambazos who laid the land, right? Who kind of like opened the curtain for the world to kind of see into. So we really are living in a world where we can be able to make more and be more and just get better and better at it.
When we talk about, you know, Africa, you're not only, you know, you're in the creative space and heavily so, but you also consider yourself quite the advocate when it comes to African storytelling and us owning our narrative. What is it about the Pan-African narrative that you feel like the global West isn't telling correctly?
There's just so much that's been untold, that's untold, not been untold. There's so much that's untold. There's so much that has been sanitized to try and appease the West and to be palatable to the West, whereas we watch Southeast Asian films and K-dramas and all these amazing things that come from the Asian continent, and it's so pure, it's so real, it's so authentic to its people, to the landscape, to the culture, to the traditions, and that's what makes it so gorgeous and so refreshing. And for me, that's really what I really want to see with us. It's the thing that I continue to advocate for. It's the thing that I continue to want to see. And when I do see it, I am just so, I'm just filled with joy. Maybe I'm too passionate of an African. I don't know. But I do. Is there such a thing? But it's also, you know, there's also the great debates when people say, you know, well, I mean, Black Panther, it's not even real Africa. I'm like, it's not real Africa, but it's an opportunity for us to open the next page, right? It's an opportunity for us to say, hey, you've already told Black is King. Hey, you've already told Black Panther, and you've already told Lion King. Now there's an opportunity for us to actually tell even more. You know, what are the stories that we have? What are the things that we are as a people? You know, we don't even have to tell historic stories of historic kings and queens who lived. There are kings and queens who are currently living right now. You know, I mean, you look at Mbappe. We look at the World Cup and when it was time for the penalties, that black lineup that stood for France, that were all African.
It's one of the reasons I, 6 years later, I'm still doing the same thing and I'm still with TikTok, is because at the beginning when I stumbled on the platform, having the opportunity to work with content creators that are from Africa and are telling African stories and now have the ability to reach audiences from anywhere in the world, I think is really important and really crucial. Because, you know, in the past you had specific media houses that kind of had the control of, you know, creating the narrative, whereas now you have the everyday person who can evolve into a content creator. So citizen journalism, for example. And I think that's really important. And that allows us to tell the African story from different perspectives, because you and I might both be from Africa, but we may have very different perspectives. So I think a platform like TikTok is kind of crucial in allowing that to happen, and allowing people who are outside of Africa to watch content creators from Africa, as well as content creators who are in Africa, to be able to reach audiences wherever in the world.
I like that you touched on collaboration with traditional media versus the, you know, the creative economy or the digital economy itself. But one might argue that because they are no longer placeholders or gatekeepers, then the quality of content is no longer the same. What is some of the ways you go about tackling that? And as previously mentioned, some of the strategies that make other content resonate versus another type of content?
I mean, I think there are different types of content, right? So there are creators who prefer to keep their content in a very UGC way. UGC would mean user-generated content. So it speaks specifically to the fact that that person is not necessarily using big lights and multiple cameras to create their content. And there's a place for that kind of content. There's a place for that raw and authentic type of content. The way in which you can gauge whether your content is good quality or not is by how people are engaging with that content. So for example, the likes, the shares, the comments, that tells you how people are engaging with that content. So I think there's a space for different types of contents, and within those different types of contents, there are definitely indicators that can tell you whether your content is good or not. And I think these days when we talk about quality content, I think that perhaps means authentic content. So are you resonating with whoever you're trying to create content for? Are you showing up as, you know, natural? Are you telling a real story? Are you really connecting with people? So I think that's really the definition of quality content today.
I think if anything, we have something so unique to offer, and we can see it around the world right now. So many Africans are doing amazing things across the boards. There's huge names out there who are doing great things, and I think if anything, one thing that's been lacking for a long time is Africans telling African stories and not allowing other people to drive the narrative on us. So if anything, if we can take that power and be able to actually tell our stories as authentically as possible, sky's the limit for where we could go with our stories.
What has been your key takeaways from the summit this far?
The key takeaways from the summit is that Africa is open for business. There's a lot of business opportunities or entrepreneurs in Africa, and I've been enjoying networking with everyone and also showcasing my brand, because it's quite unique that you're a vegan chef but you come from Africa, and then there's that notion meat equals wealth. And another takeaway was just enjoying, just taking everything in, being happy. Yeah.
I like that you've actually touched on that imagery that people don't really associate veganism with Africa, and that's where you've established ground and created that niche. What's that journey been like? When did you decide this is the path I'm going to take in my culinary journey?
So veganism fell into my life when I was studying culinary arts. We had to do an intern thing, so I got a job at a vegan restaurant, and literally had no passion, but I was just pretty much good at it. And after that, I started caring more about my job and delving into the history of veganism. And I kind of, when I delved into that history, I saw that most of our ancestors were not actually meat eaters as much as we would like to think. And it's because of colonial practices that we started eating meat. So when I figured that out, I was just like, hey, if our ancestors were not eating so much meat, that means that I'm actually onto the right path, and we have to go back to our roots.
Other key topics brought to light during the summit was AI, the future of AI, and Africa's place in it. Africa has made great strides in this sector, and despite infrastructure challenges, AI still remains largely untapped.
From a global perspective, where do you see AI heading, and how is that will have an impact on the AI community?
From a global perspective, obviously there's a lot of applications for AI, and no one continent is unique. So from a global perspective, what I see for AI is, one, reshaping the workforce. The workforce today will look different, tomorrow due to AI. We need less software developers, more people who are doing prompt engineering, training AI. We need people who can engineer data, right? So let's see what's happened prior to COVID and today. Right? Prior to COVID, you had a lot of silos, right? A lot of continents, a lot of countries were narrowly focused on their ecosystem, like the workforce there, the businesses there, the problems there. Well, post-COVID and due to globalization, we are now thinking more globally. That's why I'm here in this conference. I'm looking for partnerships here in Africa. I have partners in Europe, partners in the US, South America, but globalization has really, together with AI, allowed the data to be shared across, not just your country, not just your continent, but across the whole hemisphere, right? And what that does, with the manifold of data that we're getting, we have a potential to create smarter systems, because it's taking in perspectives that are across different continents, across different countries as well. So you have an AI now that thinks very differently. A lot of people want well-rounded individuals. In artificial general intelligence, the whole goal was to create something that thinks, looks, and sounds like human. Well, the way you can be human is if you're connected with everyone on the planet. Globalization is doing that. AI is doing that because we're getting data from everyone in the planet.
There's two parts to that, though. The one part is government regulations, or regulations in general.
Yes.
There's either too much red tape, or there's too many gray area for entrepreneurs to step into and not understand how to get around the problem. The other part of that problem is understanding what African problems is that needs African solutions.
Yes.
So how do you bring those two together?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I'll name three problems, that I think would help Africa in general. So we have probably the most sparse, people who are geolocated sparsely here in Africa. So delivery, is one of that. How do you do logistics for delivering packages? And going back to globalization, now you could go on Etsy, on Amazon.com. You don't have to just go to Jumia, right? You can go and order something that you need that could be medicine, for example. How do you deliver medicine to people who you can't deliver to? I think drone technology helps there. I think computer vision with the drone technology also helps there as well. I think battery technology helps for the drones to fly to these different remote regions. Another problem that I think needs to be solved in Africa is, ledger, bank trust, being able to do financial business across Africa, within Africa. So this is where you're seeing the rise in crypto, right? So Web3 technologies help there. And creating partnerships with folks who are doing stuff like that in the US helps bring that, or really make it quicker here. And then the final problem is healthcare. Healthcare in general, access to medical providers. So in the US during COVID, and actually across the world, we saw hospitals shutting their doors because they couldn't handle the demand that COVID caused, right? But what came out from that in the US was the boom in telemedicine. Why couldn't that happen here? We can create telemedical platforms where you can call in with your doctors, and in order to make that happen, we need to work with our telecom providers to boost the power, the speed of the internet here. We need more fiber wires being laid here. If we have that, then any doctor could service. You're not even limited at that point to specialists here in Africa. You could go to India, you could go to the US and talk to the doctor that helps solve whatever the unique disease or illness you have. So
it sounds like you were saying that private industries need to actually collaborate together to solve a particular problem.
Absolutely. I mean, that is what makes AI so powerful, right? Is a lot of people think that AI is this magical thing, but really it's just pulling together all this data that us as humans, honestly, are too narrow-minded to see. Hey, this is the unique solution, and it requires that, and they all came from different data sources.
Do you feel that Africa is regulated enough, or should be more enabled?
I think I think regulation is definitely needed, absolutely, in the sense of the fact that AI does have significant impact, but I think it's a really complex question, and I think it's an open debate right now in terms of what's the right level of regulation, regulation where we stop harmful things from happening, while at the same time that doesn't stifle innovation. So I think it's really a complicated question. I think for sure there needs to be some sort of regulation, but what's the right type? I think that's open, because I think the space is, even the technologies are evolving so fast. So I think it's really an open question. Many folks that are smarter, more experienced than me are debating this. So we'll leave it up to them.
Do you feel that not enough is being done in other areas, or other regions in Africa that can help leverage on this, on these experiences?
I can't comment on other regions, but I think the fintech story, I think, is definitely, like Nick kind of mentioned earlier, in the kind of Forbes panel around how advanced the kind of digital payment ecosystem is here. I think it's something that should be championed and pushed. And I think AI can only accelerate some of these use cases, make it more efficient. For example, in terms of customer service questions, being able to use a chatbot to respond to that in a customized way, being able to manage risk, detect behaviors or things or transactions that are out of the norm, being able to reduce fraud. So I think AI can only be an accelerant, accelerant to the kind of strength of fintech, and I would even extend towards insurance as well. I think AI can also, do a lot of positive things, like enable people who wouldn't have had access to insurance to be insured now, because now you can use algorithms to calculate the risk.
The Forbes 30 Under 30 Summit also invites trailblazers, critical thinkers and influencers from all walks of life to part their wisdom on the youth. Whether it's helping the younger upcoming generation understand what investors are looking for, or knowing which barriers need to break to direct young people to a path for a brighter future.
In Africa, how can we make sure that this notion of the first this and the first that can now fall, and young people can feel more empowered to just follow in suit after trailblazers like yourself?
Thanks for that, Chanel. Being the first, it's sad that we're still talking about the first in 2024, the first black woman to be a CEO of the top 4 banks, Mary Vilakazi, right? It's still that way. Here is the thing though, when you become the first anything, anyway, it's actually saying, open the doors. Be deliberate and intentional to make sure that there's critical mass of people who look like you that have been excluded. So we are still going to have quite a few firsts. We haven't had first woman president in South Africa, so we're not there yet. We haven't had first finance minister who's a black woman in South Africa. So there are so many firsts that we are still going to go through, but we can fast track them by doing something, each one of us, wherever we are. I always say, sometimes people will say, that position doesn't have power. No, every position has power. A chancellor has no executive role, but it's a position, and you use it to do good. So my message to young people is that you are not too young and your position is not too minor for you to make the change you want to see in the world.
But it seems like young people are struggling to find those opportunities, especially when it comes to investment opportunities, platforms like this, etc. So what do you think needs to be done to, you know, quicken the process?
I'm looking at a framework of entrepreneurial ecosystem in the country, South Africa, and in the continent, because it matters. It's not just only about entrepreneurs, the young people that are looking for opportunities. It's about the support, the actors in the ecosystem. It's government. Are we making it easy to start a business? Are we making it easy for people to stay in business? But more importantly, what incentives and support are we giving for people to scale and become multinationals? So that is the support. It's the physical infrastructure. It's the tax incentives. And when you look at the Department of Trade and Industry, what are we doing for those young entrepreneurs in the township, in the rural areas, to make sure that their products and services are accessible and exported?
You do refer a lot of times to youth. We do sit with the youth unemployment challenge, crisis, however you like to phrase it. From your perspective, Sandbank's perspective, what can be done to help funnel these the youth to become employable or become successful entrepreneurs?
It's actually one that touches me, because we're sitting with structural unemployment in our country. I think I stand to be corrected, over 60%, and that's a ticking time bomb. And the challenge with that is that we need to be, I think, intentional and deliberate in terms of what do we do to bring them into the system. And from what we do in the bank, we have graduate programs across each and every business unit. So I sit in the corporate investment banking space. We have global markets, we have investment banking, we have coverage, we have TXB, we have risk. So there's an intentionality in making sure that we go out to all of these universities and actually recruit the students that we bring into the system, and that allows them to come through and actually learn. But I do know that the bank is also very intentional in supporting SMMEs to actually make sure that, you know, people are coming through the system, because not everybody is going to be in corporate, and we can only do so much. So there's also, how do we help and drive people that have creative ideas?